Welcome. Thank you for coming to our session on the Cybersecurity NSF ATE Centers. I'm Terryll Bailey. I'm the External Evaluator for CSSIA, Center for Systems Security and Information Assurance. And I'd like to introduce my co-facilitators here, starting with John.
I'm John Sands. I'm with CSSIA. I'm one of the co-PIs for CSSIA.
And I'm here, Zdravkovich. I'm with CyberWatch. And we are now National Center, so it's National CyberWatch Center. It's on the East Coast at Prince George's Community College.
So how this happened, and John, you might want to tell the story of how the white paper came to be.
Yes. Just a little background. I don't know how many of you remember this, but about 11, going on 12 years ago, AACC and the National Science Foundation put together a conference in Washington, D.C. to talk about this growing need for cybersecurity professionals. Remember, this was 12 years ago, right? And that they really felt the community colleges needed to play a role in preparing the workforce, expanding the capacity for cybersecurity professionals. So looking through the bookshelf, and it was about 10 years. Last year I was looking through some of our library and so on, and I pulled this book out, and I was like, this has been 10 years. I think it would be fascinating if we could get the evaluators from the ATE centers that specifically work in the area of cybersecurity to take a look 10 years back, and what impact have we had since that conference and the establishment of some of the projects and centers that were out there and so on. So we asked the evaluators, because most of the time the PIs and the co-PIs are working doing things and so on, and we don't necessarily do a good job all the time capturing the data and reporting the actual impact and so on. So I thought it'd be a really good idea if we could bring the evaluators together and put a white paper together that really identified what impact have these projects and centers have. Where were we 10 years ago and where are we now? What are the resources that are available to people now? What type of impact? What programs have been established? And looking back, it really has been unbelievable amount of progress over 10 years. And I'm really proud to say that community colleges had a major role in building that capacity and the impact of building cybersecurity programs across the country. I mean, we have literally dozens of programs all over the country now. We have tons of resources, and that's what this report basically was all about. So really what we want to do is just sort of highlight what are some of the things that have happened, what are the resources that are available to you now that the centers have been established, what type of impact have we had, what types of programs have been established, and so on. So with that, I'll hand it back to you.
So at John's request, John Sener with Sener Knowledge LLC, who is the external evaluator for CyberWatch, and I'm with the Allison Group for CSSIA, we got together and over a several months period looked at how to combine the data that we had collected. And it was a wonderful process. It was great working with John. And we ended up looking at what the centers did jointly and what kinds of perspectives they held in common. So they were very well aligned, these two centers. However, how they went about meeting their sort of common goal there was different. They were both regional centers at the time, different markets, different regions. So there was a lot they had in common, and then there were areas where each one shone strongly. So and that's really how the report ended up getting structured. So here we are. We already talked about that. So what we're going to talk about here is the impact of the ATE centers. That's National Science Foundation Advanced Technological Education. It's in the Directorate for Undergraduate Education at NSF. What's the impact of the centers? Why did we have that impact? And what does it look like for the future? So that's kind of what we're going to be covering here today. All right, so one of the things that both centers focused on strongly was the development of curriculum. John, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
I'll start with this one. So back 10 years ago, Eric and I we were the first regional center, and we looked at, was there a common curriculum, common standards out there? And really, there weren't in the area of cybersecurity, especially at our level, at the community college level, and even building community skills into the high school, secondary level. So one of the first things that we did was to come up with a curriculum model. We developed 9 courses. We tried to align them to some national standards. So at the time, we worked with NWCET to identify a skill set, a national skill set for people that were going to work in the cybersecurity area. So basically what's happened, we came up with a basic curriculum model, and as the other projects and centers came up, we shared that curriculum, and we found that that model grew, and we now have really a pretty substantial library of courses that are out there, supported by all types of supplemental types of content, including labs, virtual environments, assessments, aligning to some of the national and professional certifications that are out there. Right? Part of what we wanted to do was to build that on stackable certificates. So the idea was, we could have multiple entry and exit points. That was really important because of our population. As you probably are familiar with in other areas, community college really has 3 major populations. Right? We have one that are transitioning from high school into the community college in a career pathway. Right? And those typically are going to come in and try to complete a full associate's degree. But we also found that we were drawing a lot of people that already worked in the field. Right? They were already IT professionals, but they needed to upgrade their skills, and they needed to learn the new tools and technologies to protect their environments, right? So, and a lot of them people already had degrees, right? So the idea was to develop courses and certificates that they could come in, not necessarily have to go through a full 2-year degree, but come in and upgrade their skills, learn some of the new technologies, some of the new products that were out there, and so on. So in building the curriculum, we built it with this idea of stackable certificates. And it was also really useful for people that were changing professions, right? We've seen a lot of people in our area come in and they either had related professions or totally unrelated professions, and they wanted to come in because they've seen this as a high growth area of high opportunity, and so on. So the stackable certificates really made that possible. Right? And part of what we did then is projects and centers came on, we really started to build somewhat of a common library. So, and we used that as we started to grow our membership. We put a lot of these curriculum online so schools could download them, and they could, the whole idea was open source, so you could take it, use part of it if you wanted to, or use the whole thing. Or you could use it as a model to build your program from scratch. But the idea was to have an inventory or a library out there that schools could look at and determine what their capabilities would be and what they could adopt. Right? And I think that's continued to grow over the last 10 years, and now there's just a plethora of courses available. And then part of what we tried to do was research and developing resources. And I tell the same story all the time. As I met with schools, what were the obstacles in starting cybersecurity programs? Now, these obstacles are a little bit different than most IT programs, right? First obstacle I found was that most institutions didn't want these tools and technologies on their production networks. So we had to figure out ways, how could we teach these things without interrupting their traditional production networks? Right? So that led us into things like virtualization and so on. So part of that, we had to develop resources to make that available. Right? The other thing is very complicated. I mean, when you're teaching cybersecurity programs, one of the things you're teaching are attacks, right? So you have a specific victim with certain types of vulnerabilities on it, and then you need the tools to take advantage of those vulnerabilities, right? There's a lot of work in building those types of labs. It's not a traditional class where you're teaching an individual product, right? So there's a much higher level of thought process and configuration that goes into building a quality program that's going to allow students to really work with the types of tools and the things that they need to. So there was a lot of effort put in by all of the centers and a lot of the partner colleges to the centers as well in helping us build these lab sets in virtual images that we could bring a student through a program that they're going to get a good experience out of. Right? Then of course other areas were faculty development. Now we had these tools, and these tools continue to evolve at an unbelievable pace, right? How could we keep faculty skills up in preparing students to use these tools and technologies, right? So we developed other research we'll talk about here in a minute, but one of the things we learned that competitions were a really good way to do that. So we started the process of these cybersecurity competitions, and again, sharing resources within that.
So I was just, are you done?
And then finally, the last one were lab exercises in virtual environments, and what we tried to do was be integrators. So we tried to bring a multitude of vendors together, integrate their products so that we could have environments that could host these things and that we could replicate easily between institutions. And that's really gained a lot of momentum over the last couple of years. Part of it was trying to grow competitions and so on, but we've now got several initiatives out there nationally where we can actually share these virtual environments and share the labs within those virtual environments. And hopefully some of you went to the other sessions where we showed some of the things, right? So that's, I think, was a major impact over the last 10 years. Where we came from, really, we had nothing, right? And where we are now with a fairly substantial library of things. And if you're interested in any of these, we'll share our website afterwards and show how you can access these resources.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, John, because I heard the word competition and thought, oh, we're going there. So, the two main ways that these centers directly impacted students were through that curriculum out to instructors who teach students and through competitions. Both centers, there were no, when they started, there was no participation from community colleges in the CCDC. And both centers had in common the competition as a learning modality, as a way to enhance student achievement. They also saw it as a way to get people engaged and into cybersecurity and into careers, into loving this stuff. And so they both had this in common. The way CyberWatch went about it was they really saw the competition as an anchor event. And they built around it job fairs and workshops and faculty development and all this kind of stuff. That's how they used competition. And CSSIA used competitions to go into the states. So they had how many states? 5 or 6 states.
7 states.
Region. And they then said, well, let's start state-level competitions. So we'll have 3 in Ohio and 5 in Michigan, and where they would build up, win the state competition, go to a regional competition, and then go to nationals. So they engaged more and more students. They were looking at how can we scale for students. So both of these were very highly effective ways to leverage existing national competitions out there. And then from that, CSSIA pioneered virtualization. I don't know if you want to talk more about that here.
If you go to YouTube, you probably have seen many of the videos out there from all the centers now and all the projects. We've tried to capture those types of things so they can be replicated. But I think it was important that in the case of CyberWatch, one of the things that they did, they really focused on this really being a holistic event where you built in the job fairs, there was a good recruiting opportunity and so on. And one of the things that we tried to do was, how could we incorporate more schools? Because it's really expensive. When you look at the cost of running these competitions, it was very expensive. It was very difficult to expand it and give more schools the opportunity to have their teams participate. So what we really tried to focus on, how could we bring down the cost and increase the number of schools that could participate in the competition? And I think through the collaboration, we've come up with some unbelievable results with these competitions. The number of students now that are participating, the level that community colleges now are participating. I mean, community colleges are literally giving the universities competition and are very competitive in these events now. And then it's spurred on other things. So now we have a league that's been spurred on. So we have formed a league a couple years ago. We have a stadium out there that students can actually practice with. But all of these things came out of the idea that competitions were a way of expanding the learning process in this area. And it really gave students a much more realistic experience on how to actually defend their networks and working as a team and so on. I tell you, a lot of our students leave the competitions and say that that was part of the best experience they've had is going through our programs because they had to think on their feet. Yeah, Dan?
The first competition I went to was a regional in 2007, and I did some videotaping there, and I'll never forget what one of the students said to me. I learned more in these 3 days than years worth of classes.
And I think the important thing that competition really that I've seen is that you can't cover everything in the classes. But the approach that we've taken, and I think a lot of the schools have taken, is to create a cybersecurity club. And now, what does our club do? Our club literally reaches out to the vendors and have them come in and teach them how to use their products so they can be more competitive in the actual competition. What's their motivation? Well, they've seen the classes before them recruited out of these competitions. We've had the majority of our students recruited right out of these competitions because the companies come and observe. They see these students thinking on their feet, able to solve problems and so on. And it's been a great way to advertise the types of skills that they're prepared for and also for them to actually show their skills working on their feet and seeing actually observe and be able to recruit students that have the skills that are necessary to do things like protect our organizations. So I think the competitions have been a huge success. I'm happy to see the growth that we've experienced over the last 10 years. Yeah.
Do you do anything with the Cyber Patriot program?
We've had some of the partners have had some experiences in the Cyber Patriot. Anything you want to add to that, Dan?
Well, they're involved with it, but what John created was his own high school competition with high schools. So they do something very good locally, but I'll be involved with Cyber Patriot more on the national level if you want information on it.
Yeah, and I can tell you some of the things that we've done as well. We've worked with like Skills USA. Not that they're going to have a separate thread for cybersecurity, but anyone that goes into IT nowadays needs basic security skills. So we've worked with several of the chapters with Skills USA, and we've actually helped them align the basic skill sets and incorporate those into their LAN and their A+ competitions. So to me, that's been, I actually think that was a better way to do it because we have a wider audience. And we really want to cast a wider net at the secondary level for the ones that actually want to specialize in this as they go on to the upper level institutions.
And as evaluators, John and I agreed, John Sener and I agreed that it's a great leveraging of federal funds coming into these centers, then to go out and use Skills USA has a huge already operating organization that brings in tens of thousands of kids. So how to leverage those federal dollars in the best way rather than starting afresh is to support existing like Patriot and like Skills USA. So they've been very strategic, both centers have been strategic in doing that. So this is, as a result of all that curriculum that these two centers developed, as a result of all the competition work that both centers did, this is the number of students that were reached. We estimated it out, both of the two evaluators estimated it out. You can see a big leap here, and for CSSIA. So the two centers had different models. CyberWatch had more of a membership model where schools would join CyberWatch. CSSIA had more of a partnership model, and in its 7-state region would select certain schools to partner with it. It would sub out money to those schools to do certain things, competitions or develop curriculum, that kind of thing. And after the first 3 years, some schools were kind of not so performing so much, and quite a few were. And so the PIs said, well, it may be you guys, and it was mostly the administration actually from those colleges, don't really want to continue to be a partner with CSSIA, and they got new partners. And those new partners were larger, and they stepped in and picked up the ball and really ran with it. So because of that, then we had more student engagement. There's a big jump for CSSIA in that between the 3rd and the 4th years. So as John and I, Sener and I, looked at the two centers, their leadership has been strategic in how to maximize the impact that they were making. They had to make some difficult decisions at times, and they both did along the way. Do you want to add anything to that?
I think one thing I just add to this, in the partnership model, this is hard data to track with multiple institutions. It's expensive to track. It's hard to track. So with the partnership model, we had a carrot there. I mean, we basically, if we were going to provide funding for competitions and funding for other things, one of the things that we required was that they at least provided minimal tracking of participation, graduations, and so on. And that's where you can see the spike occurred, because we finally got a little smart on this and said, we're not going to keep helping with all these things if we can't capture those numbers and understand what the true impact was going to be. So I know some people in this room are probably partners in that, and we held their nose to the grindstone there for a while that if we were going to provide funding, we really needed to see numbers. All right, and it's too expensive and too difficult to try to track all of these partner schools. So it was really the only way we can do it, and it's not necessarily still the most accurate way to do it, but at least it allowed us to get a better understanding of how many actual graduates, how many participants, and so on. Yeah.
And we had actually access to their institutional data, and we're able to extrapolate and make changes where the different institutions had different definitions. But we could do unduplicated headcount, basically. CyberWatch had a much, much more complex situation, much harder, tougher situation. But again, John was able to get samples from key players and then from that extrapolate out. So we feel like we've got good data, if not perfect.
If I may add,
yeah.
We used the core members that we started out with, and even though we added on top of the 10 members, additional 30, 40, now we have over 100 colleges and universities, but we use the numbers of the core members so that they are solid data rather than sort of superfluous.
So I don't even think this really reflects true impact, but it's as best we could do is truly documenting those impact numbers. Yeah.
Where are you going with tracking? Are you going in the direction of long-term tracking?
We're going a couple different directions. You can add this as well, but what we want to start to do on our side is, as we share resources, we are going to expect as a part of the sharing of those resources that we get data back. So everything from the number of hits of how many people have downloaded curriculum, to how many people have used the virtual environment. Now that we're going virtualized, we're able to, we can literally in some cases actually capture how many hours students have been on specific exercises.
What about where they are 5 years after graduation?
Well, I think that's, first of all, there are 2 or 3 different types of data and the reasons why we need them. One is, I don't want to turn my back to anybody. One is the NSF wants it immediate, period. They support us, ergo, we produce data. That's one reason. But second reason is to have more justification for what the 2-year institutions, the contribution to the workforce in this nation, what we do and how we contribute. That solid data means a lot for that. That means that the government, the impact on government's potential funding, not only through NSF, but through other government agencies, industry, etc., is essential. Now, the longitudinal follow-up and seeing where these students are 5 years from here, that's very, very difficult, as you know. It's next to, it can be done at the 4-year institutions where they go to graduate schools and you have them in the graduate school, etc., etc. The SFS, I don't know if anybody here knows about the National Science Foundation SFS program. No? Okay, that's for 4-year institutions and research universities. They have to do that and to track those students, but that is a very controlled group of students. In the community colleges, as was pointed out, they come in, they go, they come back, they go, they work, they come back. So it's very, very difficult. So what John Sener, our evaluator, did, he used examples. and I don't know if you have done the same.
Yes, we have.
Specific examples and stories that illustrate where these students do, what some of them do and where they go and what they have accomplished, just as a testimonial to the impact of the program.
Right.
So what we really need is for us to put in for more research grants, because that's really what you're talking about. So the amount of money that's in any given center or project grant for evaluation is not sufficient to do that kind of longitudinal study. And a lot of it has to do with just being able to track people. There are some systems in the U.S., Texas actually they collect data on their students and they can track them, and even into the workforce. So there's some isolated places where we could probably do some studies, but I think that maybe it's incumbent upon some of our centers or some of us to try and get some research grants to do these longitudinal studies.
I think it's a great idea, because looking at everyone has gone through CCDC.
Yeah.
Nobody can answer the question, why are they now?
Yeah. What difference did it make? And yeah, what are they actually doing? So, yeah, it's a great idea. We should maybe talk.
I used to be, before I retired, the vice president at the community college, and so I'm familiar with other programs. And in health programs, the accreditation is based on longitudinal studies.
Yep.
And they require those students to be followed for a number of years. Who does it? Faculty do it. Faculty and department chairs, yes.
Wow.
And this is something, and they have developed a very nice way of doing it. I know at my institution they did it, because that's what the accrediting body requires. Now, we are not there yet. I think this whole field is fairly new, but I think we may be going in that direction, and we may start thinking collectively how to do that best.
Well, I mean, just to give you some input, the National Science Foundation this year decided to follow a couple of our students and find out what their impact was and so on. So they brought a film team out and literally took one of our graduates from last year and wanted to capture their story. So I mean, it was a pretty compelling story of what impact it had, because here was a student that we outreached to when they were in high school. They came through, completed our program, they were hired, got a job, went on, completed their bachelor's degree, and ended up hiring 7 additional students for a particular company in our region, all graduates of our program. And they were able to capture this in the video, and I'll give you maybe I'll show it at the end here if we have time. So, you know, so there are some qualitative ways of doing this, but you really want, you know, it would be really nice to be able to capture, you know, the quantitative hard data that shows, you know, what are the actual numbers that we've impacted. I think it would be interesting for everyone to see, and you know, I'm familiar with what happens in the healthcare area also, and I think ultimately that may be where we see something like this happen. Yeah.
So quickly, John's going to talk about the faculty development model.
Okay. One of the things that we really focused on in our center was faculty development. We did some research in the early part of early years of the grant, and you know, we looked at what are the obstacles. So I mentioned some of the obstacles were the difficulty in managing the environment and creating the labs and so on. But of course, one of the major difficulties was keeping faculty up to date and trained, right? So we looked at the traditional model that we used initially in doing faculty development. It was just too expensive. We could not reach the number of faculty that really would make a true impact. So we tried to come up with better ways of providing a faculty development model. So what we came up with was a blended model. So each summer we would offer a minimum of 12 to 15 courses, and the way the model basically worked is that we would literally send our instructors somewhere for a course rather than having people fly in from around the country to our facility or one of our partner facilities. Because once we had saturated our little area, the Midwest area, we knew there was a much greater need for faculty development. So literally what we did is we set up a process. You can go to our website, you could request a class in a particular area to be hosted, and we would either fly our faculty or a group of faculty out and actually do in-person training for a portion of the class. So it's a blended model. We typically have an orientation for a day. So everyone has expectations of what the class is going to be. We would let them know how to be prepared for the class, where to get the materials, so on. Then we would fly out for 3 days of in-person training, and then we would follow up for a week or 2 weeks in letting people complete the exercises and complete the course requirements and a final skills and knowledge assessment. And what we found is we quadrupled our number of faculty reach within the first year we implemented this model. Recently, what we've tried to do was expand it to do even 100% virtual classes. We're trying to do is balance the effectiveness of the training versus the number of people that we can reach, and of course try to stretch the dollars as far as possible to reach the greatest number of people. So right now what we're doing, we have pretty much a combined program. We do several courses now completely online. With the virtual environment, it's much easier to do that. We can still have a fairly high level of interaction because everything can be taught in a virtual environment now. And we're finding more and more schools have adopted the idea that they are going to need a virtual environment just to teach this curriculum. However, we still want the opportunity to have that in-person experience, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. Schools need more than just train their faculty. I mean, we could literally sit down with them and help them design their lab, what does it look like, design their programs, give them models for submitting curriculum that was going through. And then we get into the whole designation things and the CA2Y and mapping their curriculum. So the in-person part of it really gave us the opportunity to sit down with faculty members and other representatives from the schools and help them with a holistic approach to implementing the program. It wasn't just training faculty members on a particular class. We really learned our lesson teaching the Cisco security curriculum, because we trained 300 faculty members in a year and a half, 300 faculty members. Cisco came back to us and said, only 28 schools have adopted the curriculum. How is that possible? We trained 300 people, only 28 schools have adopted it. All right, so we really felt, there's more than just training the faculty. There had to be hand-holding to help them get a program established in each of the institutions. And we've done training across the entire country. So we've been in just about every state now offering training. The only thing we've required is a minimum of 15 people attend the class, and that has not been very difficult because we provide the training free. It's local, so you don't have to fly somewhere for it. So that's, I think, been very beneficial, and you'll see our numbers, but the numbers have continued to grow in the area of how many faculty members have been taught.
Just something to add? Okay. Watching the time here.
Yep.
So, back up here. Yep. All right. So, both of these institutions, these centers, have provided structures for the cybersecurity education community across the country. So, as John and I talked over the months about how did they do this? Because both of these centers have been very impactful. So both of them supported a cluster of desired activities and outcomes. So we talked curriculum, we talked competitions, we talked faculty development here. They aligned them. Both took a very holistic approach. There's some, with some schools starting at zero. They realized there was a lot to build. As the virtualization pieces come in, the CA2Y, which we're going to talk about in a minute, much the same. So it's building whole systems within community colleges and within communities for those community colleges. Very strategic, and they ended up with substantive, far-reaching impact for good in cybersecurity education across the country. So here we go. We're looking at numbers here, and you'll have access to this if you want it. In addition, CyberWatch then created the CA2Y program, and Vera's going to talk about that. And again, this is whole system approach.
How many of you know what does CAE2Y stands for? Okay, how? CAE stands for Center of Academic Excellence. It's a program that was initiated by the National Security Agency, NSA, 14 years ago. It was done for 4-year institutions, and then 3 years ago, actually, when CyberWatch came into being in 2005, one of the questions, I was the first PI of it, one of the questions I asked, why is it that 2-year institutions are not centers for academic excellence? Well, it doesn't exist. Suffice to say, we worked very hard, and in 2010, the Centers for Academic Excellence 2-year became a reality. And the first 6 institutions became CAE2-wide in 2010, additional 7 in 2011, and an additional 13 in 2012. And you can see the growth. At 2:30, John and I will talk about the impact and the importance of the Centers for Academic Excellence program, so I'm not going to dwell on it. But it's very important to recognize that when we started, CSSIA is an older center. I think you preceded us by 2 years, I think. And they came into being in 2005. The number of community colleges, remember there are 1,200 approximately, plus minus, community colleges in this nation. And the number of those who mapped their courses, who even had a cybersecurity program, was minimal, absolutely minimal. In California, you have 110, plus I think, or 116 community colleges, and of those, actually, there is no CAE2-wide institution, 0, out of 110 and plus. So it shows you the need, and what the CAE2-wide program provided was, it provided impetus for other institutions to go and to strive and aspire to this status, to strengthen their programs and to grow. And I'll stop at this point, because again, we are going to do it at 2:30 in a much greater detail.
Okay. And so my understanding is that this, when you are at Center of Excellence, of Academic Excellence, that means you've mapped your curriculum to the NSA standards, and you've met other qualifications as well, correct?
Criteria, 6 major criteria. And an important aspect of this program, any CAE, there is now CAE2-wide, CAE for 4-year institutions, and CAE-R for research institutions. So there are 3 different designations. But all are called Centers for Academic Excellence. And yes, you have to, there are prerequisites, which as we speak are changing. So you have to be mapped to certain standards, and there are criteria. And there are 6 sets of criteria. But the important thing is to remember, this is an institutional designation. Unlike an ABET accredits an engineering program, it was only for that engineering program. When the national health accrediting bodies accredit that, it only goes for that program. This is an institutional program, and recognition of institution as a center of academic excellence. That's a major difference.
And I actually think it's good for our institutions. Part of what they do is have the presence of the institution recognized at a ceremony each year as you get this. So it truly is an institutional effort to get this too. So it's not just aligning your curriculum, not just training your faculty. Really, there's lots of other things within the institution that you have to examine as part of that, and we'll get into that in our other session.
All right, so both centers work with education pathways, both work with industry partnerships. However, CyberWatch was really much stronger in pathways, and CSSIA had some very innovative practices that they engaged in with industry partnerships. So, Vera, would you talk a little bit about the CyberWatch education pathways efforts and results?
Yes, we established a graduate program for our faculty. It became very clear that we started with offering different faculty workshops and so forth, but it became clear that there was no sort of complete, or it became clear to me that it wasn't a whole complete effort. So I felt strong as a PR at the time that what we needed to do is offer faculty an opportunity to gain a graduate degree in cybersecurity. So we sort of shifted the funds around, and we separated a certain pot of money, and we supported faculty to take a number of credits and supported them, not if a credit was costing $3,000 for a credit, but rather to, we limited the number of the amount that we funded, and we funded faculty to take graduate courses, to complete the graduate degrees, so that they benefit the entire nation in that regard. I remember a question was raised in front of the National Visiting Committee. But what if you do that and you support the faculty, and then the faculty leaves the East Coast and goes to the West Coast or to Chicago? And our answer was, it doesn't matter, because what we are doing is benefiting the entire nation. It doesn't matter whether they will stay within our region or whether they are going to move. So we did that, and that was very, very good. And we continued it for up till now, when we are now national center, so we're not doing that any longer. And we have, CyberWatch has a very strong K-12 outreach. And the person who led that gave a presentation yesterday. Her name is Dr. Davina Felice-Mental, and she has done a wonderful job of really building the total pipeline, K-12 to 2 years to 4 years. She works with the state organization to make sure that the cybersecurity program goes into the high schools, so that students from high schools are already sort of acclimated to the cybersecurity education, go with some rudimentary knowledge and move from there into the 2-year courses and then into the 4-year courses. So that's what we have done.
And I'll add just a little bit on our part. We took a little bit different approach. We experimented with this over the years and would look for things that would really have true traction and impact and really create a pipeline. So we had everything from grade school days. We'd have a 3-day workshop where we'd bring grade school kids in and get them interested, and we had workshops in that area. But the things that we came up with 2 things that I think have been very impactful, and we share these with any schools that are interested. One is we came up with a 1 credit hour career orientation course. And what we're finding is we've had dozens of high schools adopt this course. They can adopt it within an A+ course or Cisco curriculum or whatever. But the whole idea was it was based on 5 simple self-directed exercises where students literally would go in and walk through some career orientation processes. So they would go through and find out, what are the jobs in cybersecurity? Most of them had never heard of the areas of specialization in cybersecurity. Most of them never heard of a pen tester or a digital forensics specialist, or the dozens of different specializations in cybersecurity. So the first thing we tried to do was expand their understanding of what are some of the jobs that are out there. Right? As part of that, we also had them look into what are the career credentials that are necessary to get into some of these jobs. So what are the certifications that are out there? What types of education levels are required? What are companies looking for when they hire these areas of specialization? We would have them basically go through a self-paced little process where they pull a matrix out and they would identify the different types of credentials that were necessary. The capstone of the course is that we literally would have a personalized study plan for each student going through this process. So when they leave, we literally sat down with them and they would identify, okay, what certifications are you looking for? You've looked at all these jobs out there. This job needs this certification. This job needs this one. This might need a 2-year degree. You might have to go on for a 4-year degree for this particular thing. We'd sit down with them as faculty members and do a personalized plan. And we would walk them through, and what we found is that it gave us a better way of measuring our success. Because not every student is coming in for the terminal 2-year degree. Some are coming in to learn a particular product, to prepare for a specific certification, maybe to cluster a couple certifications and so on. So it gave us a much better perspective of why our students were there and how are we going to be successful in meeting their goals. Right? So, and that's taken off. We have a multitude of high schools that have adopted that as part of just the ICT program at the high school level. We have all our students, by the way, and all our partner students go through that program also. And it's only a 1 credit hour class, so it's fairly easy to do, and we did part of it online. Right? The second thing we did is we created a security awareness program. The emphasis came sort of from the CA2I and the mapping. But the awareness program, again, was 1 credit hour, and the idea was to get this across the curriculum, not just in IT. But this course in our institution, in several of our partner institutions, is taught in the business area, it's taught in healthcare areas, and they don't have to necessarily teach that course as a standalone course. They could take the knowledge and skills that are taught and the objectives that are taught in that class and actually incorporate it in one of their courses. But we would help them actually gather this information together, make sure it aligns to national standards, and enable them to adopt it in their curriculum. So, as far as the pipeline and pathways establishment, I think those have been the 2 most successful things. And we have toolkits for both of those up on our website. You can actually download if you're interested in looking at how you might be able to adopt those. Okay.
1 minute, John, on industry partnerships.
1 minute. We'll do this quickly. One of the things that we constantly struggle with, it always gets me to, people see you got a grant and they think it's so much money, but when you see all the things that you have to invest in, and so it really doesn't go that far. So one of the things we found is that we could not continue to do things like sponsor competitions everywhere and other things. So we had to find ways of engaging our corporate partners to help us alleviate some of those costs, and in some cases take over some of the costs. So part of it has been the idea of integrating and having integrated solutions where instead of us having to build it from scratch, we could have business partners help us. It's been donations. It's been training things. We've had partners, some of our business partners, hold workshops over the last couple months of teaching people how to use their actual products at no cost, right? But we had to reach out in order to have a wider impact, because some of these things were not sustainable unless our partners stepped up and helped us. And what we found in many cases, they're more than happy to step up and help us. It actually drives their business as well. So that's been a major initiative of ours over the last couple of years. All right, and then last one.
That's fine.
No, I have gone.
Okay.
So virtualization. So I want to take a minute. So from a non-technical, I'm not a technical person, from a non-technical person's perspective, what the virtualization has allowed is, it started out looking at labs and competitions, and it has grown well beyond that. CASIA took the lead in that. They're partnering with CyberWatch. They are working together. They've got this whole new Cyber League competition that they've developed that allows for all kinds of things to happen that are not possible without the virtualization. And their partnership with NDG has been key to all of that.
And one last thing with virtualization to say is that we're not just using virtualization for virtualization to give us better leverage and so on. Students have to leave our programs understanding what virtualization is and how to use it. It's a basic skill nowadays in IT. So it's more than just a way of delivering courses. It's more than just a way of delivering labs. They need to have some kind of foundational understanding of what virtualization is and why it's important. Not only why we leverage it, but why businesses around the world are leveraging it. So, virtualization, it shouldn't be its own curriculum. It needs to be part of all curriculums, including cybersecurity today. And that's what I want to end with virtualization.
So future. CyberWatch has become a national center. CASIA has become a national resource center. Both of them are collaborating in new ways, and they are both committed to increase the culture of collaboration across community colleges in the nation. So here are enabling structures, and so do you want to talk a little bit about the National Center and what you see for the future there?
One major mission of the National Center is, of course, to increase that culture of collaboration, work with other centers and projects, and grow programs nationally. But I would like to point out, for any ATE center, not just the National Center, regional center, or other ATE centers, one of the tremendous benefits, and actually I feel very strongly about it, and we shared some of that with NSF, is that an ATE center impacts not only the region, it has a much broader impact It catalyzes a growth of new centers. We at CyberWatch have worked with people in Louisiana. We have worked with people in California. We have helped grow other centers. We help catalyze growth of new projects. We have a project in Washington State. Not we, but there is a project that we helped grow. So what happens is through all these activities, what you see is if you were to look at the map, you see only 4 centers. Now there are 4 centers. One on East Coast, one in California, in LA, one in Chicago, and one in Tulsa, Oklahoma. These are the 4 cybersecurity centers. But what you see is a tremendous impact around each center, which overlaps nationally. So depending where you are geographically, you can go to the website of any one of those 4 centers. You can learn about help with either student competition or about developing your own project. We have gone and helped other people in other institutions write grants for projects and help with centers. So you get all sorts of help with faculty development, curriculum development, growing new centers, whatever else you need. That is what this is all about.
That's a great way to wrap it up. Final questions or comments? That was excellent. Thank you, Vera. Thank you, John.
Well, welcome. We hope to have you touch bases with any one of us when you need some help with any aspect of it.
And John, where's the white paper? Is it posted anywhere?
We are going to post it up on CASIA under resources. So if you go to CSSIA.org, we can put this PowerPoint up there, and we'll also put the actual white paper itself up there that categorizes the supports and impact that the centers have had.
And there are a couple of great examples, both from CyberWatch and from CASIA, in Florida and New Mexico, of colleges that had nothing, where these centers have gone and taken them to C82Y status. So there's some good stories in the white paper too.
I just want to mention, as an industry partner, we'll run free workshops at other regions. Through CASIA, if you contact CASIA and you want us to run a workshop to teach people how to build these labs, you can schedule us to come run a regional workshop. We ask you get 18 to 20 instructors that will do it for you.
This is Rich Weeks of NVG, so if you're interested in the whole virtualization piece, please see him before you go.
And the other partners have done the same thing. VMware, we've done VMware classes, we've done Citrix classes, and they're more than happy to help and help us accrue the cost because it's important to their business as well. So those are things you're interested in. You definitely want to contact us.
Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.